The next issue that I would like to speak to deals with results counting, tallying, and announcement issues. Now, the first of these is with regard to complementary mechanisms. Our concern is that there are no regulations for the use of complementary mechanisms in the case that the electronic results transmission system fails. This means that there are problems with that if there are problems with digital transmission, there are no legally stipulated provisions that regulate what course of action the IBC must take. This is a dangerous gap, and unless it is immediately addressed, it could lead to widespread confusion and chaos around results counting and announcement. The next issue, it again has to deal with valid and valid votes cast. The difficulties around the valid vote cast is the definition of votes cast. In determining the winner of the presidential contest, Article 138 of the Constitution provides that the winning candidate must receive more than half of the votes cast in the election. There is a lack of clarity regarding how the Commission intends to interpret this provision. Will it take into account the totality of the votes cast for the president, or will it only take into account the valid votes cast? The Supreme Court's 2013 ruling that only valid votes should count in the calculation disregards the fact that everyone who placed ballots in the ballot boxes cast their votes. If a vote could not be counted because of the voter's choice was not clear, because the ballot was lacking a security feature, or because it was unmarked, that does not mean that it was not cast. Discounting those votes effectively disenfranchises those voters. Again, here, this is a problem that was created by one of the petitions that were presented before the Supreme Court in 2013. Now, to explain, the old constitution of that was in force until 2010 provided a formula for how to determine the person who had become president. And the language in the constitution was that the Electoral Commission would declare a person elected as president who garnered the majority of valid votes cast. That was the phraseology, valid votes cast. Now, the new constitution changed the phraseology and said you would take into account not valid votes cast, but the new phraseology became all votes cast. So the previous phraseology, valid votes cast, the new phraseology, all votes cast. Now, when we were in the Supreme Court, there was a petition brought by Dennis Itumbi and Moses Kuria, that valid votes cast, that basically what they argued in court was that the new phraseology, all votes cast, in effect means valid votes cast, which was the phrasing of the old constitution. And the Supreme Court found for them. That is the only petition that succeeded in court. All the other petitions that were presented failed. So that petition succeeded. Now, the difficulty it presents is one of the maxims of legal interpretation is change of language means change of meaning. So if the old constitution had a particular language that migrated to a different type of language, did the meaning change? The Supreme Court found, in effect, that despite the change of language, there was no change of meaning. So you have a new constitution that has new language sitting side by side with a finding by the Supreme Court that the change of language did not change meaning. Now, next week when the votes are in, the ABC would have to determine a result, and all votes cast, that formula is important. At the first threshold is determining whether the candidate has got 24 counties, where the first threshold of 24 counties, 25% of 24 counties, that's the first threshold, and then the second threshold being the threshold around whether the person has actually gathered a majority of the votes in the election. So that's the issue about which we would have thought that the IBC should make a prior commitment to as we go into elections. We wrote to them more than a week ago, and this is an issue that we've raised also with the Chief Justice, but we wrote to the IBC formally more than a week ago and told them that it would be nice if they took a position on it, because then it is nice for people to know when the votes are in how they're going to be counted. It ties in also, remember, with what happened in the last election, where we had a very, very large number of spoiled votes at the beginning. Now, if spoiled votes, and then the IBC, you recall, announced that there was a problem with how the computing was being done with using the technology that was in place, and the number of spoiled votes then reduced drastically thereafter. So if you've got, in an election where all votes cast count, spoiled votes in effect assume the importance of a candidate in and of themselves. They have that effect because they take away from the leading candidate and the capacity for the leading candidate to meet particularly the 50% threshold. So it is not an idle concern, and whichever way a decision around it is made, especially if it is made with foreknowledge of what the results might have been, then somebody can complain. The reason why IBC is interpreting it this way is either to advantage or to disadvantage a particular person. So that is why we thought the IBC needed to take a position on that ahead of the election, so that we are clear, raw safi, this is how the results will be computed. Then our other issue is counting, tallying, and announcement of results. In its recent explanation of how votes are counted and announced, the IBC neglected to include mention of the posting of results forms at polling stations. After results have been announced at the polling station, election regulations require the IBC to affix a copy of the declaration of the results at the public entrance to the polling station or at any place convenient and accessible to the public at the polling station. Voters have a right to see and scrutinize the results of their votes, and the IBC must immediately clarify that it will comply with this law. And the fact that the IBC is an obligation to display a copy of the results undermines the argument by the government about people going away from the polling station at least 400 meters. So who are you posting these results to see? The IBC officials. The people have voted, and you tell them you are unwanted and you must clear from here, and you must not come back, and so on and so forth. How can they? Why are you pinning up? Why is there an obligation to pin up the result? It is an obligation. It is an aspect of public participation. Public participation. The first aspect of public participation is provide information. So the IBC is required to provide information of the results of what these people who are doing all day. This is the outcome of what you've done. The second part of that is giving them a chance to raise any concerns that they may have, even if the answer to their concerns might be the only way to change what we have announced is if you go to court or something like that. But that chance that people can engage the officials about the results they've just posted is undermined by the security requirement that we are hearing from the government, that the moment people vote, they must clear and stay very far away from the polling station. It is also undermined by the arguments that we've had that people will not be allowed to take pictures of things going on at the polling station, because one of the ways to preserve to preserve memory of and evidence about what has happened is a capacity to take pictures. We feel, and we need to say this very clearly, that there is a clear determination to crack down on information on polling day. They're keeping people away, making sure they go as far away as possible, and criminalizing the presence of citizens around processes that essentially involve them, criminalizing the possibility that citizens can take a record, including a picture record of what they've participated in. It in effect amounts to a crackdown on information, and a crackdown on information is equivalent to a cover-up. It can't be a promotion of transparency in elections. Additionally, it is worrying that Form 34B that has been published by the Commission does not include a space to show the totals of the constituency tally. This is a serious omission, making it impossible to know the constituency level totals for each office. Since the judiciary has ruled that presidential results are final as announced at the constituency level, tally sheets must include totals. The IBC has also issued a directive that cameras and phones will be barred from the interior of the polling stations. This is what I've already talked about. While it is understandable and necessary to protect the secrecy of the vote, measures to do so must not be excessive. The public has a constitutional right to participate in the elections, including through recording and photographing the process, as long as it does not violate the secrecy of the vote. In particular, any member of the public has a right to take a photograph of the results once they are published. So what we are telling the IBC and the government, there is a balancing act that they must observe here. We have rights as citizens, and giving an impeded access to people to do these processes is not a favor that is being done to them. It constitutes a key and a fundamental part of their right to participate. Extra ballot papers for presidential elections. There has been a lack of transparency with regard to the printing of ballot papers, and there is suspicion about the need for 1,260,200,000 odd more ballots than registered voters. These surplus represents 6.2% of the number of registered voters. Related to this is the IBC's printing of 12 Form 34As, which is presidential results forms at the polling level per polling station. Multiple copies of the same form can be dangerous, opening the door to the possibility of differing totals and lack of clarity around which of the 12 are legitimate. Our conclusion is that based on the above issues, Kura Yangu finds that the integrity and credibility of the pre-election period has been severely compromised. We strongly urge the IBC and other authorities to immediately address the issue related to election day and results counting and announcement in order to protect the integrity of the remainder of the process. The Kura Yangu Sauti Yangu coalition is establishing an election center to be housed at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, which will receive and process member organizations' elections observations from across the country on election day and thereafter. These observations will be used to create and disseminate regular statements on the integrity of the process, focusing on opening of the polling station, voter identification, counting procedures, results announcement, violence, and the conduct of security forces. The center will be open to the public, and officers will also be on hand to hear complaints, observations, and concerns. Experts will also be available for interviews with the media. We will be open during working hours, that is from the 8th at 7 o'clock, and we'll close at 6 o'clock every day in the evening. And we will remain open until the 11th. If there is need to vary that date to extend our opening, we believe that by 11th the election will hopefully be done and dusted. So the election center then for us becomes a place of call for civil society colleagues. So it will give us an opportunity to um, to process collective decisions as the situation emerges. It will also be a place where the media can access us easily. If media wants to get reaction, you can access us easily because we'll be based in one place. It will also be a place for solidarity. People who feel they have a contribution to make around elections can call at the center, but also members of the public who observe critical incidents as they go about their business are very much welcome. We have an elaborate arrangement that will process any issues that are brought in by members of the public. So the center is, so we have got basically the walk-in type of arrangement where the public can interface and interact with what we are doing at the center. But we also, as I've explained, we have field observers. The cooperating organizations have got field monitors that we are sending to various parts of the country, and we've got a series of relationships that we've established that will give us access to monitoring, to a very large number of monitoring reports from the field that touch on critical incidents, but also touch on the results. So the reason why we are creating this election center is ultimately to give us opportunity to have an informed way of querying what the IBC is telling us. What often happens, because these are a large and often challenging country, when a situation or an incident happens, the only source of information about that situation or incident happens to be official sources. You can it becomes very difficult to get another view about what is happening there. So to get balanced views about what may happen around the elections, our field monitors will feed us with whichever information they're able to do with around critical incidents, but also around the results that they gather, and that can help us to form general pictures about what is going on, and also offer leadership at our own level about how to solve situations and issues as those may arise. So you're welcome to call in at the center on Gitanga Road at the Kenya Human Rights Commission, and colleagues will be on hand to deal with your concerns, and you're also welcome to direct people who may have a place to where they seek to direct their concerns and issues to come and see us during those dates.